In April of 1841, Silas Rutledge made an announcement that shocked even the cruelest plantation owners in South Carolina. He was placing his daughter, Catherine, a 28-year-old woman weighing over 260 pounds, under the complete authority of an enslaved man named Ezekiel Cross. Not as a nurse, not as a companion, as her owner in every way that mattered except on paper. The white society of Colleton County was scandalized, but they had no idea what Rutledge was truly doing, or what Ezekiel Cross would do to Catherine over the following months. By November, Catherine's body had changed in ways no one could explain. 13 men were dead, and Cypress Grove Plantation was nothing but ash. What really happened between that enslaved man and the plantation owner's daughter? What did he do to her that terrified everyone who witnessed it? Before we uncover the disturbing truth, subscribe, hit that bell, and comment your state below. Now let me take you back to where it all began. Spring in Colleton County arrived with oppressive heat and humidity that made the air feel solid. The Combahee River moved slowly through the low country, its dark water reflecting Spanish moss that hung from live oak trees like funeral shrouds. Rice paddies stretched for miles, their flooded fields worked by hundreds of enslaved people who moved through water up to their knees from dawn until dusk. This was wealth built on suffering, prosperity extracted from human misery, all of it justified by men who convinced themselves that cruelty was simply the natural order of things. Cypress Grove Plantation sat on 800 acres of moderately productive land. Its owner, Silas Rutledge, was not quite part of the county's elite but desperately wanted to be. He owned 58 enslaved people, which made him wealthy by most standards, but barely qualified him as mid-tier in local society. The truly powerful families owned thousands of acres and hundreds of slaves. They summered in Charleston and sent their children to universities in the north. Their names carried weight that could open doors or destroy reputations with a single word. Silas had married Elizabeth Yancey in 1812, a union that brought moderate land holdings and a respected surname. Elizabeth had been a practical woman who kept meticulous records and seemed more interested in profit margins than social climbing. She died giving birth in 1813 to a daughter christened Catherine. For 28 years, Silas raised Catherine alone while focusing his energies on gaining entry to the inner circles of county power. He was a tall man, thin in the way of people who forget to eat when consumed by obsession. His hair had gone grey prematurely, giving him a severe appearance that matched his cold temperament. In business, he was known for being shrewd but honorable enough, the kind of man who would drive hard bargains but keep his word. His daughter Catherine had grown up isolated, educated by tutors, never quite belonging anywhere. By 1841, she was 28 years old and weighed nearly 260 pounds. Her body was swollen from years of medications prescribed by doctors who diagnosed her with hysteria and female nervous disorders. She suffered violent fits where she would scream and throw objects. She had attacked her father with a letter opener the previous year, leaving a scar across his left hand. The white society of Colleton County whispered about her with false sympathy. Poor Silas Rutledge, burdened with a mad daughter. What a shame. She had been such a pretty child. None of them knew the truth. None of them knew what Catherine had witnessed when she was 12 years old, or that her madness was not madness at all but a rational response to living with monsters. The letter arrived on April 7th, delivered by private courier. Silas opened it in his study expecting business correspondence. Instead, he found 3 pages on expensive paper sealed with red wax bearing a symbol he recognized immediately. A scythe crossed with wheat stalks, the mark of the brethren of the harvest. The brethren, 13 men who gathered in darkness to perform rituals they believed strengthened the land through blood sacrifice. They mixed old European traditions with beliefs borrowed from enslaved people who understood spirits and power. They believed the strong were meant to consume the weak, literally when necessary. Silas had been initiated in 1822. He had attended perhaps 40 gatherings over 19 years. participating in rituals that ranged from disturbing to monstrous. The letter informed him he was in debt. $12,000 borrowed over years of gambling losses and failed investments. An impossible sum. Repayment would require selling most of his land and all his slaves, destroying everything he had built. But the letter offered an alternative, a demonstration of commitment from members in difficult positions. Silas would take his daughter Catherine and place her under the complete authority of one of his enslaved men, not temporarily, not as punishment, as a genuine transfer of responsibility lasting 1 full year. The enslaved man would have total control over her person, her daily activities, her treatment. Silas would announce this publicly at a gathering of the county's prominent families, explaining it as an extreme medical measure for his daughter's condition. The humiliation would be absolute. In a society where white women were supposedly precious and protected above all others, Silas would be declaring his daughter worth less than his property. But if he agreed, his debt would be forgiven, and the brethren would provide financial support to restore his position. Silas sat in his study for hours that night. He thought about his options. Bankruptcy would destroy him completely. The brethren had connections to every judge, every lawyer, every politician in the region. They could make him disappear if he became a problem. Or he could sacrifice his daughter's dignity to maintain his own position. The choice society had trained him to make. Property over people. Power over morality. He wrote his acceptance by candlelight and sent it before dawn. 3 days later, another letter arrived with a name and brief history. Ezekiel Cross, age 33. Purchased recently through an intermediary from a Virginia plantation. Skills included carpentry and herbal medicine. Temperament listed as quiet and obedient. What the letter did not say was that Ezekiel Cross had been selected specifically for this purpose. That his placement at Cypress Grove was no accident. That he carried his own burning need for justice and the patience to wait for exactly the right moment. Ezekiel arrived on April 13th in a wagon driven by a slave trader named Henderson. The wagon pulled directly to the main house, unusual since most slave transactions happened near the barns. Silas came out onto the porch, shading his eyes against the morning sun. In the wagon bed sat Ezekiel. The first thing Silas noticed was his eyes. Most enslaved people kept their gaze down as a survival mechanism. But Ezekiel looked directly at Silas, his expression calm and assessing. It made Silas deeply uncomfortable. Ezekiel was tall, perhaps 6'2", with broad shoulders and lean muscle from a lifetime of hard labor. His skin was unmarked by whipping scars. His clothes were simple but clean. His hands were large and calloused, but his fingers had a precision that suggested skilled work rather than just brute force. Henderson climbed down and handed papers to Silas. Ezekiel Cross, as requested. Previous owner said he was quiet but capable. Your associates want you to know this one was carefully selected. Silas barely glanced at the papers. He addressed Ezekiel directly. You understand why you are here? Yes, sir. Ezekiel's voice was deep and measured with a slight Virginia accent. My daughter is unwell. You will be responsible for her care. Doctors have failed. You claim knowledge of herbal treatments? My grandmother was a healer, sir. She taught me before I was sold. The transaction completed quickly. Ezekiel was shown to a small cabin near the main house, separate from other slave quarters. He was given basic supplies and told his duties would begin the next day. He was informed that his sole responsibility was Catherine's care, and that failure would have severe consequences. Ezekiel nodded and said yes, sir, when required. Then he was left alone. For the first time since arriving, he allowed his expression to change. His jaw unclenched slightly. His shoulders relaxed. He sat on the bed and pulled from inside his shirt a small cloth bundle. He unwrapped it carefully, revealing a piece of worn paper with 3 names written in a child's uncertain handwriting. Sarah, Benjamin, Ruth, his wife, his son, his daughter. Sold away from him 3 years ago to a plantation in Alabama known for working slaves to death. He had learned they all died within 18 months. Sarah from untreated fever. Benjamin from an injury that turned septic. Ruth from simply giving up. A 6-year-old child who stopped eating because she could not understand why her family had been torn apart. And Silas Rutledge had been the one to sell them. Not because he needed money, not because they had done anything wrong, but because he had been demonstrating to the brethren that he could make hard decisions without sentimentality. He had split a family like kindling for burning. Ezekiel had spent 2 years working his way south, deliberately getting sold from plantation to plantation, always gathering information. He learned about the brethren through whispers. He learned about their rituals and members. He learned they considered themselves above any consequence. When the opportunity came to be sold to Rutledge specifically, Ezekiel knew this was his chance. He would have access to Rutledge's house, to his secrets, to his vulnerabilities. And sometimes justice came not from courts or laws, but from patience and planning, and being willing to become exactly as monstrous as necessary. He folded the paper with the 3 names and tucked it away. Then he lay back and stared at the ceiling and began planning what came next. His first day began on April 14th. A house slave named Judith, middle-aged with graying hair, brought him to Catherine's room on the 2nd floor. She knocked reluctantly. "Miss Catherine, your father has brought someone to help with your treatments." A crash from inside, something heavy hitting the wall. Then Catherine's voice, slurred but venomous. "I do not want more treatments." "Send him away." Judith looked at Ezekiel with sympathy. "She has bad days. This is one." Ezekiel opened the door and stepped inside, closing it before Judith could follow. The room was large but dark, heavy curtains drawn. The air was stale, smelling of unwashed bedding and something else, the sweet rot smell of mercury. Books scattered across the floor, a shattered picture against the wall. Clothes everywhere. Catherine sat in a chair by the cold fireplace, wrapped in a stained dressing gown. Her dark hair hung loose and tangled. Her face was puffy, eyes unfocused. Her hands trembled continuously on the chair arms. She looked at Ezekiel with confusion, then fear, then anger. "Who are you?" I said. "No more doctors." "I am not a doctor, miss. My name is Ezekiel. Your father asked me to help you." "Help?" She laughed harshly. "That is what they all say. Help, treatment, medicine. They mean poison. They mean chains. They mean silence." She stood suddenly swaying. "I know what this is. He is punishing me again, for remembering, for speaking, for refusing to forget." Ezekiel stood still, non-threatening. "What are you supposed to forget?" The question caught her off guard. Her anger flickered to something more vulnerable. "You do not know?" "I know nothing, miss. Only that your father says you are unwell." Catherine studied him intently, as if really seeing him for the first time. "You are not from here." "Virginia originally, miss." "Do you know what happens in this house? What they do in the cellar?" Ezekiel's pulse quickened, but he kept his expression neutral. "I do not know what you mean." "Liar. No heat in it. Just exhaustion. Everyone lies. It is easier than truth." She sat heavily. "Leave me alone. Tell my father his newest torment failed." But Ezekiel moved to the window and drew open the curtains. Sunlight flooded in. Catherine cried out, covering her eyes. "When did you last go outside, miss?" "I cannot walk that far. I'm too weak." "When did you last eat without laudanum in it?" "The medicine is necessary. Doctors say so." "What if the doctors are wrong?" Her hands came down from her eyes. She stared at him with hope and terror mixed. "What did you say?" Ezekiel turned from the window. This was the moment. The first card played. "I said, what if the doctors are wrong? What if everything you have been told about your condition is designed not to help you, but to keep you controllable? What if your father has been poisoning you for years to ensure you never become well enough to speak about what you saw?" Absolute silence. Catherine's eyes went wide. Her trembling hands stilled. For 30 seconds she just sat there, her mind working. When she spoke, her voice was different, clearer. "He told you." "Your father told me nothing, miss. But I have eyes. I know mercury poisoning. I know long-term laudanum use. Healthy women do not become like this without someone working hard to make them that way. Why would you say this? Suspicion crept back. This is a trick. You are testing me. I am telling you I can help you become truly well, clear-minded, strong enough to walk out of this room. But it will not be easy. Your body has been dependent on those medicines for years. Stopping will be painful. You will feel worse before better, and your father will not approve. Then why would you do it? Ezekiel met her eyes. Because I have my own reasons for wanting Silas Rutledge to suffer, and the best way to make him suffer is to give him back a daughter who is sane enough to remember everything and strong enough to speak about it. The truth. Dangerous to speak so plainly. But Catherine was damaged, not stupid. She would see through manipulation, but genuine common cause that she might believe. You want revenge on my father? Yes, miss. What did he do to you? He sold my family, my wife and 2 children. Sent them to their deaths for no reason except to prove something to people who judge worth by cruelty. Catherine absorbed this, then nodded slowly. The brethren. He sold them for the brethren. Not a question. The brethren, miss? You do not know? She laughed, something manic in it. You will learn. Everyone learns eventually. She leaned forward. If I agree, if I let you help me, what happens then? You get well, miss, and when you are well, we decide what to do next. We? I have my revenge to plan. You have yours. Perhaps they align. Catherine studied him intently. Finally she spoke. I want them all dead. My father, Judge Pelham, Reverend Crenshaw. All of them. Every man who stood in that cellar. I want them to suffer first, to know it is coming, to beg. Then I want them dead. The venom was shocking. Not for its intensity, but because it came from someone dismissed as mad and harmless. This was not madness. This was rage, concentrated by years of suppression. Ezekiel nodded. Then we have an understanding, miss. Catherine, if we are conspirators, use my name. I cannot, miss. Not where anyone might hear. We must be careful. Then know something, Ezekiel. Catherine's eyes glittered dangerously. I have killed before. 3 people. House slaves who might have told my father about my lucid moments. I cannot remember exactly how. The laudanum blurs everything. But I know I did it. They disappeared. Their families were told they ran away. She smiled terribly. So if you plan to betray me, to use me, then dispose of me, know that I am not a victim. I am something worse. Ice ran down Ezekiel's spine. He had expected an ally. Not someone whose capacity for violence might exceed his own, but he kept steady. I believe you, miss, and I will not betray you. Good. Catherine stood more steadily. Then let us begin, but I have one condition. When this is over, when we have had our revenge, I want to die. I do not want to live with what I have seen and done. You will help me with that too. Agreed? Ezekiel had not expected that, but he was committed now. Agreed. Then we have a deal. Catherine extended her hand. After hesitation, Ezekiel shook it. Her grip was stronger than expected. Over the following week, Ezekiel began Catherine's treatment. He gradually reduced her laudanum, replacing some with herbal tinctures. Valerian root for anxiety and sleep. Chamomile for digestive distress. Milk thistle to help her liver process accumulated toxins. The process was brutal. Catherine spent 3 days in bed with fever, shaking and vomiting. Ezekiel stayed with her through it, holding a basin while she was sick, wiping her face with cool cloths, speaking quietly just to remind her she was not alone. When the worst passed, she was weak but clearer than she had been in years. The constant tremor decreased. Her speech was less slurred. She could focus on reading. Then real work began. Ezekiel had her walking, short distances at first, from her room to the hallway end and back. It exhausted her, but he insisted. Every day a little further. He adjusted her diet, bringing lean meats and vegetables instead of heavy pastries. He limited portions strictly, though she fought him, years of using food as comfort making restriction difficult. While working on her physical recovery, they talked. Catherine told him about the cellar, about what she saw at 12. She described it in detail that made Ezekiel's stomach turn, but he listened without interruption. She told him about years of gaslighting that followed, her father convincing everyone, including herself, that she was mad, that she invented memories, that nothing she said could be trusted. She told him about the journal she kept hidden, pages documenting dates and times when her father left late at night, names of visitors at strange hours, sounds from below that should not be possible. Ezekiel told her about his family, about Sarah, who sang while working and taught their children to read despite the danger, about Benjamin, who at 8 could do mathematics that amazed overseers, about Ruth, who loved flowers and picked wild blooms to make their cabin beautiful. He told her how Silas came to the Virginia plantation with a buyer's warrant, how he inspected them like livestock, how he agreed to purchase all 3 for reasonable price, then changed terms at the last moment, saying he only needed the woman and children, not Ezekiel, how he deliberately split the family for no practical reason but simply because he could. He smiled when he did it. Ezekiel said quietly, "That is what I remember most. My son crying, holding my leg, begging, my wife trying to be strong, telling Benjamin to be brave, and your father smiled, like it pleased him to cause that pain." Catherine listened with newly clear eyes. "I am sorry. I know sorry is just a word, but I am sorry you suffered because of what my father is. You are not responsible for what he does, miss. No. But I am responsible for what I do next, and I promise you, Ezekiel, he will pay for what he took from you. They will all pay." The formal announcement was scheduled for April 29th. 41 people gathered in the Cypress Grove dining room for what invitations described as an important family announcement. The county's elite arrived in carriages, Judge Pelham with his wife Eleanor, Reverend Crenshaw with his daughter, Marcus Fanning and his family, Benjamin Lyle from the bank. The meal was elaborate: oysters, roasted duck, multiple rice dishes, sweet potatoes, fresh bread. A towering cake for dessert. Through it all, Catherine sat at her father's right hand, eating sparingly, speaking when spoken to but volunteering nothing. Ezekiel served alongside other house slaves, moving quietly, refilling glasses, clearing plates. He was invisible to most guests, but he listened to every word, watched every interaction, filed away information. After dessert, Silas stood and tapped his glass. "My friends, thank you for joining us. As you know, Catherine has been unwell for years. We tried every treatment, doctors from Charleston, a specialist from Philadelphia. Nothing helped, until recently." He gestured toward Ezekiel. 2 weeks ago, I brought in Ezekiel, who has knowledge of herbal medicine. As you can see, Catherine is much improved. Clear-eyed, calm, more herself than in many years. Polite murmurs around the table. Catherine kept her expression neutral, though Ezekiel saw her hands gripping her napkin beneath the table. "This improvement," Silas continued, "has led to a difficult decision. Catherine requires ongoing care more intensive than our household can provide. After much consideration, I've decided Ezekiel will assume full responsibility for my daughter's welfare. He will have complete authority over her treatment, daily activities, and living arrangements, effective immediately." The murmurs changed tone. Confusion now. Several guests exchanged glances. Mrs. Pelham's face registered shock. Marcus Fanning spoke up. "Silas, I do not understand. You are placing your daughter under a slave's care, permanently. I am placing her with someone who succeeded where others failed. My daughter's health is more important than social convention." "But surely," Reverend Crenshaw interjected carefully, "there are other options. A companion, a nurse, someone more appropriate." Silas's expression hardened. "I have made my decision." Catherine agrees. "Do you not, daughter?" All eyes turned to Catherine. This was the moment. She could refuse, could expose everything, could bring it all crashing down. Instead, she smiled, Small, controlled, revealing nothing. I trust my father's judgment. Ezekiel has been kind and his treatments help. I am content with this arrangement. Perfectly delivered. But Ezekiel saw what others did not. Saw her knuckles white on that napkin. Saw the flash in her eyes promising violence. She was playing the required role, the obedient daughter. But inside she was screaming. The evening passed in awkward conversation. Some guests left early. Others stayed to speak with Silas privately, asking questions they did not want public. Ezekiel caught fragments. "Are you certain this is wise? What will people say? The brethren will not approve of this becoming public." That last from Judge Pelham, spoken low near the study. Silas's response was too quiet to hear, but whatever he said made Pelham nod and clap his shoulder. By midnight, all guests had departed. Catherine retired to her room. Silas went to his study. Ezekiel helped with cleanup, then made his way upstairs. He knocked softly on Catherine's door. "Come in." She sat by the window, still in her dinner dress, looking out at dark grounds. She did not turn. "It is done then. I am officially your responsibility. Property of property. How absurd. How are you feeling, miss? I want to burn this house down with everyone in it, but we must be patient. Is that not what you tell me?" "Yes, miss." I agreed because I want them to feel secure. I want them to think this is just my father's eccentricity. I want them to forget about me while we work. She turned to look at him. Did you see their faces? The disgust, the pity. They think I am pathetic. They have no idea what we are planning. And what exactly are we planning, miss? Catherine moved to her dresser and pulled out a wooden box. Inside were papers covered in her handwriting. I have been documenting everything I remember for years. Dates, names, ritual descriptions, coded so it looks like nonsense if found. But I can decode it. We have enough to destroy 20 men. And will anyone believe us, miss? A woman recently recovered from madness and an enslaved man? No. Which is why we need proof they cannot dismiss. Real physical evidence. She pulled out one specific page. I know where they keep their records. The Brethren maintains a ledger of all activities. Every ritual, every sacrifice, every member's participation. It ensures everyone is equally guilty. My father mentioned it years ago before he realized I would remember. Where is this ledger? In the cellar. There is a hidden room beyond the main chamber. I never saw inside, but I heard them talk about it. That is where they keep everything they cannot afford to lose. Ezekiel felt excitement mixed with dread. Such a ledger would be devastating evidence, but getting it meant going into the heart of the Brethren's domain. We would need to access it when the house is quiet. My father travels to Charleston monthly for business. The next trip is May 14th. He will be gone 3 days. That gives us 2 weeks to prepare. We need the cellar layout, every room, every hiding place. I can help. I've been thinking about this for 16 years. I know exactly what needs to happen. They spent an hour going over details, speaking in whispers. Catherine sketched the cellar layout from memory. Ezekiel asked about guards, keys, slave schedules. When he left her room, it was nearly 2 in the morning. He made his way to his small room, mind racing. He was fully committed now to conspiracy with a woman who was brilliant and damaged and frightening. He pulled out the paper with his family's names and looked at it by candlelight. I am doing this for you, for Sarah, for Benjamin, for Ruth, for every person who suffered because men like Silas Rutledge believe power gives them the right to destroy lives. He blew out the candle and lay in darkness, listening to the house settle. Somewhere below, in a cellar he had never seen, were secrets that could tear apart South Carolina's most powerful families. In 2 weeks he would go down there to find them. The 2 weeks passed with deceptive calm. Catherine continued improving. Her weight dropped. Her mind stayed sharp. She walked further each day. More importantly, she was translating sections of her coded journals for Ezekiel, filling in details about the Brethren that made his blood run cold. The Brethren was not unique to Colleton County. It was part of a larger network across the South. Connected societies in Charleston, Savannah, New Orleans, Richmond. Different names, but always the same structure. Wealthy men who believed their power derived from ancient practices of dominance and sacrifice. They believed they continued traditions going back thousands of years, Catherine explained one afternoon. European mystery cults mixed with things learned from enslaved people. They twisted it into something monstrous. Justification for things that have no justification. And the sacrifices? Not always human, sometimes animals. But other times they take people who will not be missed.